Felt someone touch my shoulder, and I looked up and there's two angels in the back seat. One had brown hair, one had blonde hair. At that moment, the truck flipped on its side, and we went up in the vortex.
This is Touched by Heaven. Everyday encounters with God, those moments when heaven and earth collide. And we see God. We see His hand reaching out, attempting to get our attention, inviting us into a closer relationship. So here's where we share these encounters with angels, as well as near-death experiences, divine intervention, prophetic dreams, big and little God incidents. I'm your host, Trapper Jack. Welcome. Butterfly people. You know this story, or part of this story maybe? I became familiar just a few years ago, actually. And this was huge. This was a massive event in 2011, May, and it happened in Joplin, Missouri. And these butterfly people. Here's the deal. There was this tornado, an F5, and it was 6 miles long. Picture 6 miles of tornado. And it just dismantles, crushes a third of the city. Suddenly, 7,500 buildings aren't there anymore. 7,500 buildings. Cars? Another 7,000. The car that was there is now, where'd the car go? And, you know, when people looked at the devastation, the general response was, oh my gosh, how many thousands of people died? 161. A lot of people, but nothing like they thought it was going to be when they, started going through everything. 161. So, and these butterfly people stories. So here's the deal. Amongst those sharing their miracle stories were kids. And these kids talked about the butterfly people, angels, winged creatures, if you will. And they were there popping up in places, sometimes not saying a word, but people just felt calm. Who were these people that suddenly appeared and disappeared? Sometimes like that. And there is a film about all of this. And we're going to talk to the filmmaker by the name of Greg Fish, who I talked to just a couple of days ago about this. He has made a movie called Butterfly People. The website is butterflypeoplemovie.com. I want you to see this movie. I'm going to play some clips from the movie while we talk to Greg to give you an idea of what this is about. It's one thing to hear this. It's another thing to see this movie about this happening in Joplin, Missouri. A couple of things about angels before we jump into this. I was reading an interesting article just recently about how we're related to the chimps, the monkeys, the primates, and all that, but you could make a great case for closer cousins being the angels. Look at the angels. Intelligent. They're not robots. They have a free will, but they choose 100% of the time to follow God. These angels are so adoring of God. They understand worship, and they call us to do the same. And as we talk about this story with Greg Fish and play clips from the movie, and we listen to some of these clips, just think about how God is sending love down onto Joplin, Missouri with this mercy of His angels, the butterfly people in this particular story. All right, let's talk to Greg Fish.
Hello, Trapper Jack.
Mr. Greg, how are you?
I'm doing well. I was just trying to get my earbuds working before you called.
I'll try to mess with it then. Okay.
That's great.
Nice job with the documentary. It's beautiful.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
And Joplin is where you were born?
Joplin is home. The tornado is really kind of something that brought us back to the area after we were in Texas for several years. I remember growing up there, the attitude was, there weren't any storm shelters. If the sirens went off, you go to the front porch and try to see it. I remember a wind-nado is what they call it, that hit Crown Video, and the damage was just a bunch of VHS tapes blown all over the road. So I was actually at church that night, and I get a call from my wife, I think, saying that Joplin got hit by a tornado. And that's kind of the image in my mind, VHS tapes all over the place. And, I can attest, even 2 weeks after going there myself, no words can describe and no camera lens can capture what it was like standing there at ground zero in the middle of all the wreckage and doing a 360 and seeing that just nothing was standing for miles and miles.
Wow, yeah. And as you're walking around, you're seeing things that used to be here now over there and everything crushed.
I recall going to my in-laws' shop that was destroyed. It had one of those huge containers from Walmart a mile away slam into it. So that tells you how strong the winds were. From that place, you could look across the whole city to where the 9-story St. John's Hospital was that got moved like 4 inches off its foundation.
You're
And
not kidding when you say the hospital was moved 4 inches?
yeah, yeah. From that place, you could look across the whole city, and you would never be able to see that from that vantage point. But because all the trees were gone, you could see across town.
161 is a lot of people until you look at it and you go, how did only 161?
Yeah, and that's what experts, have also testified to the fact of that. And the Butterfly People documentary alludes to that, yeah, the numbers should have been in the thousands. So many stories of we took shelter in this closet, and then when it was all said and done, the only thing left standing was that closet where we took shelter. Things that didn't happen that should have, and things that happened that shouldn't have.
Where a car crashed into the basement, the house was gone. They were looking, trying to figure out how they're going to get out of the basement, and a ladder blew in right next to the car, so they were able to climb out.
About a man who was like trapped under a car, and a man came and lifted the car off of him and like helped him, and then when he like got up and everything, like the man was gone.
Somebody had dug them out of the debris and were walking with them several blocks to find help, and then they would turn around and the person would be gone. Eli was a 5-year-old. It took them about 15 to 20 minutes to find him, and they found him rolled up in a rug. But when they unrolled it, they did not recognize who the rug belonged to. When they called his name, he stuck his foot out. And when they asked him how he got in there, he said the man with the brown hair rolled him up in there.
I think it's Book of Hebrews that says we entertain angels. And we've had so many stories like that, similar to your thing,
Right.
or what happened in Joplin where, you're talking to somebody and then you look the other way and you look back half a second later and they're not there and the car they were in isn't there. It's like, wait a minute. So we do entertain angels. Absolutely.
We got to travel to Louisville to meet with Dr. Susan Garrett.
That was
And,
good. That was a nice segment. That was the angel lady.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was good.
And in the biblical tradition, these beings do many different kinds of things. So the whole biblical world is full of the belief in these angelic kinds of beings, these messengers of God. In the New Testament, we certainly see angels who do what I like to call search and rescue, who go to people in a crisis or a perilous situation and help them out of it.
Yeah, we all know Peter got rescued in the jail cell, and here comes the angel opening up the doors and the gates of the city and the whole thing, making sure he got out of there. And then there are the angels in this story, the butterfly people to the rescue of children.
How old was I? 12? 13.
I was 14.
I was 10. I was 4 years old when the tornado hit.
What happened to that girl in the truck? Explain the truck story.
Mason and her cousin Lage are in the back of this pickup truck, and they're at Home Depot. And it gets really bad. The truck ends up getting sucked up into the vortex. But just before that happens,
And I felt someone touch my shoulder, and I thought it was Lage. And I looked up, and there's 2 angels in the back seat, one by me and one by him. All I can remember is that one had brown hair, one had blonde hair, and they had white. That's all I really remember from them. I saw somebody else in the vehicle that was not there to begin with. And at that moment, the truck flipped on its side. And we went up in the vortex. But after I felt a gentle touch, that's when I was like, oh. And I looked up, and since they were both back there, I was like, okay, well, that gives me a little bit more of a peace and a calm in the storm.
and that gives her comfort. She sees these 2 men that weren't there before wearing white. She's comforted by that fact, and then it gets sucked up into the vortex, and Lage actually gets sucked out of the truck and falls back on his head, has a very traumatic injury. It's just, that's what she can remember, is seeing that and being comforted by that fact at the age of 10 years old, I believe.
What's the one? What's the one where she is literally pinned, or what? What's that story? I think that one was 4 years
Yeah,
old.
it's the same girl. Mason got a rebar that impaled her.
Yeah, I had a piece of angler go through here, break 7 ribs, puncture my lower lung, and come out my back. A 1/4 inch away from my spine, a 1/4 inch away from my liver. The medics came out and they were trying to get me out of the truck. They used the jaws of life to open the door, and then they first tried with a handsaw to cut it, and they couldn't cut it, so they had to use a saw to cut the bar here and then behind my back. And it felt like 5,000 bees stinging me at one time.
Later on, she talked to a deacon from her church, and he said there were these butterfly people or angels, and there were also 13 dark angels, and that one of them aimed that rebar at her heart. But the angel that was with Lage said he opened up his wings and then said, "Sorry, I still made it hit you." She believes that with all her heart, even to this day, that she was spared for some reason. Yeah, now she has just a scar and a story to tell.
Yes, she does. Yes, she does.
They start calling the descriptions of these as butterfly people. All kind of reported to their counselors and stuff afterwards. Some strange occurrences that just cannot be rationally understood.
When you hear people's survival stories, all of the kids, all of the younger kids, always mention there were these butterflies. And I remember one little one in particular was telling me, and he, as kids do, he was coloring, not looking up, coloring and just telling his story. I was laying there and the butterflies were over me, and so I was happy, and I was just like, and tears start coming down your eyes because it's like, butterflies, angels, because that's really what was protecting so many kids and giving them a sense of safety and comfort.
So you see butterfly imagery in the children's art as they're working through their traumas, and so my film, The Butterfly People, tries to make sense of that phenomenon using some of these children's first-person accounts, who years later they're not children anymore, but they're sticking to their stories that something helped protect them and give them comfort during that awful hour. Each of them saw something different, but similarities were, abounding. And another interesting thing about all the kids that had first-person stories is they all prayed, and
Every one of them.
every one of them says that they prayed. And that's fascinating.
I just got the chills because it just says so much, doesn't it? It just says so
Yeah.
much that every single time the kid was praying. Isn't that something? At all ages, throughout all the ages of this. No, prayer. It's more powerful than we think, and it can be a flash. It can just be a flash. It doesn't have to be a long, drawn-out thing. It's just a flash.
Lord help me.
Yeah, that's
it,
it, man. That's it. It's sometimes all it takes.
That's when I saw the butterfly people.
Her name's Via, and she was only 4 during the tornado, and she saw these shining objects and colorful, and 3 of them.
Is I saw like these 3 like glowing figures, like if you could imagine like the cookie cutter shape of an angel or like a butterfly, and then like almost imagine a mix of like white light and a rainbow, like that kind of light. And there was 3 of them, and they asked me if I was okay. And since I was a sassy 4-year-old, I went no, no, and no. Nobody else saw anything, but I did, and they heard me say no. But then after that, they just kind of like disapparated, but that's what I saw.
And so the brother was down there as well. They all heard her say no, but didn't know who she was talking to, and and he was a little jealous later that he didn't see anything.
Apparently he wasn't praying. I don't know, because he wasn't seeing anything and she was, and he was calling her a liar and the whole thing, right?
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
My brother was like, "You didn't see anything. You didn't see anything at all. You're a liar. You're a lying liar who lies." He was very upset that he didn't see anything.
Wow.
If that's not what it was, then like, what was it? But that is what it was, and it's nice.
Let's pause right about here. Then more with Greg Fish and more about butterfly people and how to watch this movie. It's just an outstanding movie that you should more than hear a few clips, but to watch it. You have to really experience this movie. I'm reminded how, our angels, our guardian angels, they're not really our angels. They're kind of on loan, if you will. They're God's angels, right? And but his generosity of showing his love for us through the angels. So I'm pondering, a few weeks back, I mentioned Elizabeth and I had gone on this marriage retreat. There were 400 plus couples there, so 800 strong, right? And there was somebody, giving a talk and asking us a question. I'll ask you the same question. Which is more important? I think this is the way it was phrased. Which is more important, to love or to be loved? Which is more important? And show of hands, please. And most people say to love is more important. I was one of those who said to be loved. Happened to be correct. I knew somewhere along the way I had learned that it's in being loved by God that we know how to love others. It's being loved, and you and I are children of God. Again, being shown in this movie how when we approach God as children, praying to God, things happen, right? Prayer moves the hand of God. Here's God sharing his angels with us. Here's God showing these kids his love for them, which they have to, on some level, absorb, and helps them love others more, showing others the calm and the guidance and the whatever. But it's just another example, again, how it's in being loved that we then learn how to love. Being loved comes first, and that we're getting a beautiful example of that here in this episode. All right, quick Patreon shout out. Lizzie. Okay, Lizzie Rowland. Thank you so much, Lizzie, for joining the Patreon family. Love it that you're with us. And if you'd like to do the same, go to patreon.com, search for Trapper Jack, or come here to this episode, 303. Just click your way through. Charlie, why don't you tell people why you think people join the family?
Like, I'm so grateful for your show because I think everybody needs to hear about it, because nobody really, speaks about all their testimonies openly like this. We need your show to be the biggest show in the world right now. So more people can, because even an atheist might trigger something where they think about it and they go, that one time was really strange. That did happen to me, and maybe that was an angel or God or something. Because just think about it. Your episode's the first thing that I heard. It's causing people to think about things and just open themselves up a little bit that normally, maybe they would be blocked off to. I don't know. I really do thank you, man. I really do.
Thank you, Charlie. Patreon.com. Thank you so much for keeping this all going with your stories and with financial support. I had a second conversation with Greg while he was attending a volleyball championship game series and all this kind of stuff. And while his daughter wasn't playing, he kind of ducked out of the gym for a little while and was outside. And we kind of went deeper into this, why he did this movie. And I need to tell you that, don't I? Got a link in the show notes. Take a look there. It'll take you through to the movie. You can rent the movie, $5. I did it. It's easy. It's $5, and you'll love watching this movie. You'll love absolutely watching this experience that these kids had, and the experience Joplin had as well. So, okay, link in the show notes, butterflypeoplemovie.com, butterflypeoplemovie.com for this Butterfly People movie. And as usual, I asked Greg about background. God always been there?
So I've been in church my whole life. I actually went to Bible college, and I think this film, The Butterfly People, we didn't want to set out and make a Christian film at all. We wanted just to speak to anyone, and the material lends itself towards that. And the kids we ended up interviewing, they all also had their own faith stories. So
were you trying to create a sense of wonder, if you will, or what?
I'd say so. Yeah, just because as we've talked, things are unexplainable, and so that has to account for something. And I did the same approach with my first documentary, Steadfast, and it was not set out to be a Christian film, but the people I ended up interviewing just had strong faith, and that was not planned. I had no idea walking into an interview. In some case, like one mother of a guy who perished in the storm, but he saved a bunch of people in the freezer at Pizza Hut. And he got everybody into the freezer. The door wouldn't close, so he took a bungee cord, wrapped it around one side, and held on as hard as he could until a car smashed into that freezer, popped that door off, and he flew out and perished, but everybody else survived.
Excuse
and the
me?
mother is telling the mother is telling the story, and that just still makes me cry after the million times I've watched it.
Okay, so the twister's coming, and he's trying to get everybody into the freezer. Why doesn't the door close? Maybe it's the case where somebody has to be closing it from the outside versus inside. I mean, I as opposed to pulling it shut, there had to be something in that maybe. So he's bungeeing it, hanging on so that the door is closed as much as possible. And then a car out of nowhere, or what is this?
Yeah, the cars, were flying all over the place, and it just smashed right in the middle of Pizza Hut, and popped that door open.
And out he flew, and he died.
He died,
and everyone else was saved.
Everyone else was saved. I actually know personally the guy that was right next to him, who Chris Lucas was his name, that died. He looked at him right before that happened, and it wasn't without it was without fear, but that was his time, and his mother, she loved the film, always supported it when we had screenings, and I think it helped her heal, and it helped the guy that was right next to Chris Lucas when he flew out. It helped him heal emotionally to see this film.
Wow, he saved lives. He
did.
Isn't it amazing? I'm always amazed by the spirit of people when they just step into the danger zone to do that. Just amazing.
It is. A lot of the interviews, went into questions about what would you say to a skeptic, and that provided some interesting answers, I think.
Well, since every child was praying when this happened, somewhere in the course of this, they were praying. There doesn't seem to be an occasion where one of the children found their faith through this, even though they were very small. They were young. Many of these were very, very young. It's not like they were finding their faith. Already was an element to it, wasn't there?
Right. Yeah. One of them mentions, that day we were at church, and then we went and we're riding horses, and it was a nice day, and then the tornado happens all of a sudden. So, it just so happens that they are people of faith who ended up seeing this phenomenon of the butterfly people.
But you had to know. I know. When I was talking to Steve Head, and what role did he have in this? What was he?
He did a lot of the research and actually found people for me to interview, which was very helpful. And he would say it was hard to track him down, because, a lot of them did stories even on national news shows right after the tornado happened. And now 12 years later, Emily actually was living in the United Kingdom. And it just so happened she came back to Joplin, Missouri for a friend's wedding. And I was able to get her interview there.
Wow, and that's a beautiful interview. I mean, here's someone who rode their car into the sky, came down, has a huge gash in her leg, bleeding.
Yeah.
Windows just shattered. I think they'd shattered from the pressure. And then the next thing you knew, the car jerked up and we were in the air, and things just started pelting you to the point of numbness. You just felt numb. 200-mile-an-hour winds, and throwing things at that speed and just using nothing but our skin to break that pace. It hurt. It hurt, and pieces of sheet metal that were once a car. Again, my brother said, "Emily, your leg." And I was numb. I couldn't feel anything. And I looked down, and I just remember looking at the inside of my leg. I'm like, my leg, yeah, you're right. Folding, it was like a flap of skin, and I kind of folded it back up into my leg and just held it there. And my dad had to quite literally pull me out of the car, bleeding a lot, and I ended up just laying in a puddle of my own blood. And then I started to lose consciousness, And I remember this presence coming over me, and I heard this voice that said, everything's going to be okay. And sorry, it makes me emotional. It was this overwhelming calmness and peacefulness. And in my head, it was over. This is where I died. And I had kind of given in to that. It was a miracle. Thinking that I was losing my life to, no, that's not what's happening here at all. Everything is okay. Everything's going to be okay.
She heard that voice, everything's going to be okay. And so she uses that today when things get bad. And all of them really, they still think about this pretty regularly, and it marked their life and changed them. And so she goes back to hearing that voice, and no, everything is going to be okay. At that point, like, yeah, it looks like my life is ending, but I've got peace, and now whatever else happens, it's a challenge. She remembers that, and it helps her even today.
What kind of effect are you having on people with this? What's the feedback?
Well, the very first showing we had in a historic Route 66 theater, I did have one person come up to me afterwards and say they were skeptical before. They had heard all these stories at the time, but hadn't heard any first-person accounts. And then in the film, you really get to see them, hear them, and see their sincerity. And this person came out afterwards and said, I believe now. And I said, that's great. My goal with all of this was just to get people to think and, make up their own mind about what all of this was. You hear what the kids describe it as. But just think for yourself and acknowledge that there's more than meets the eye.
There have to be a lot more kids praying to their guardian angels in Joplin, Missouri than maybe anywhere else, percentage-wise.
Well,
it's got to cast a wake after it, doesn't it?
Even today, there's on the Joplin signs around town, coming into town, there's butterflies around that sign. There's a whole mural. There's sculptures in front of businesses of beautiful butterflies. And it's all due to this phenomenon. And granted, butterfly and metamorphosis is a symbol of kind of rebirth and transformation and rising above the ashes. But to these children, it means a lot more.
I have met a couple that are like, oh, well, angels aren't real, or when you're near death, you're going to hallucinate that you're seeing things that aren't actually there. And I'm like, maybe in your mind that's true to you, but I know what I saw. I know what I felt.
I always ask my guests, what's their takeaway? What's their takeaway?
I think, as Randy Shepard said in the film, you have to have faith. You have faith that the chair you're sitting in is holding you, and God has his fingerprints everywhere, whether you see it or not, whether you acknowledge it or not. There's something bigger than all of us out there. If we would just have the faith to see it, kind of like he mentions Elisha and his servant. He asked the Lord to open his eyes, and when he did, he saw into that unseen realm and saw angels all around fighting for us.
The title alone is going to bring people in. Title alone. Everyone's going to go, wait a minute, I remember something about this.
People can rent the film at butterflypeoplemovie.com.
That's how I watched it. Spent my $5. You betcha.
All right.
Yeah. It's worth it. $5. It's interesting. Every now and then I'll get a song playing I talk about songs bubbling up in my head seemingly out of nowhere. And one of my favorites has turned out to be this song, and I couldn't figure it out for a little bit. It's a Bette Midler song. You are the wind beneath my wings. If you listen to that, you will hear your angel singing to you. You are my hero. You're the wind beneath my wings. This is the angel talking to us when we, in particular, are following God. To know, love, and serve, and all of that in this life and in the next, right? When we're doing that, and every now and then I'll hear that song just as a reminder that my angel is with me. All right. Thanks for this, Greg. I appreciate it so much. Great story. Great job on the Butterfly People movie, and just terrific.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, buddy. ButterflyPeopleMovie.com. Good stuff. It'll lift you. It will lift you. And it's great you're supporting Greg in the process as well, so we can do more of these kinds of projects. It's just great. God sending us his angels, his butterfly people. And you can't miss the fact that all the kids were praying. All of them were praying. Got that one little boy who didn't see the angels. What? Maybe he was praying. I don't know. But we know the ones that saw and experienced, they definitely were praying. Just a great reminder that we move the hand of God through prayer. And all of this, of course, reemphasizes again to approach God as a child, completely dependent on God, just like children depend on their parents. This is Dad in heaven. It's just good stuff. All right. So what is your story? I need your story. Touchedbyheaven.net. You can go there, sure, and just contact me. Let me know your story. Thanks for the Patreon help. Appreciate it a bunch. Right, Charlie?
Even an atheist might trigger something where they think about it and they go, that one time was really strange. That did happen to me.
Thanks, Charlie. Patreon.com. All right. Nice episode here on the angels, our cousins. I think they're spirit, we're spirit. We just got a little extra body hanging on us. See you next week here on Touched by Heaven. Everyday encounters with God. I'm Trapper Jack. We're around here. It's all about the truth.
You're a lying liar who lies.
Wow.